Hi, this is Michael Neuenschwander, CPA, Certified Financial Planner with Outlook Wealth Advisors. In today's video, we're going to talk about this idea of a phased retirement, that middle ground, if you will, between being fully retired and fully at work. But it's the idea of rather than simply going into retirement, cold turkey, how to get so you get a little easier to make that transition, both from the financial front, but honestly, for many people, both from sort of the social, the emotional front, as well, because many of us, let's be honest, have a lot of our identity wrapped up in what we do, for work and our social circle, there as well. But right off the bat, I want to address that there's a couple of different ways this may happen for people. One may be that you're going into a phased retirement because it's your choice. The other, unfortunately, though, maybe you're going into a phased retirement because either company or health or some other reason says you have to. So right now, we're going to address the issues that someone faces if they're going into that phase of their career where they're dialing things back because they want to. In the next video, we're going to talk about what people need to be concerned about if they're forced into this position. So first, let's simply look and say, if you're in a position where you can basically say you're ready to step back from work, maybe not fully ready to let go, but you're ready to dial back the hours, perhaps dial back some of the income, maybe some of the benefits, you may be coming to that conclusion because you feel like you're in pretty good shape to retire. And if that's the case, this is what we would normally recommend, but some of you may have already done it. Have you already done some overall retirement analysis to look at how Social Security decisions fit in there, how Medicare decisions fit in, and you've looked to say, based on if I were to really retire or if I cut back on work, are we still going to be okay for the long run? And as we touched on in a previous video, maybe make sure you're not underestimating your longevity, as part of that as well. But those decisions about, if I'm going to go into a phased retirement, what does that really mean? One, it depends on if you're over 65 or under 65. So one of the big things that keeps many people working is the need for health insurance. So if you're in a position where you could either dial back, so to speak, at your same employer and they would still cover you for medical insurance, well, then maybe that makes that decision a little easier. But if you're under 65 and you lose medical coverage, and you then have to go to the exchange to get benefits. Perhaps you may be able to be covered by, spouse's work, as well. But if you have to go to the exchange, the Affordable Care Act, what really happens is what you pay for that medical coverage is actually determined by your income. So depending on how much income you're going to still continue to earn during this phased retirement, are you going to earn enough income that it covers all your expenses, or are you still going to have to be withdrawing some from your retirement accounts? But the Affordable Care Act makes no difference on where your income comes from. So if your income still remains fairly healthy between whether it be Social Security, pension, distributions from your retirement account, plus some part-time or contract work, that insurance coverage may still cost you thousands per month. Whereas if you're in a position where it says, really, I'm going into phased retirement because financially I think I could retire, but I just want to kind of keep my hand in things, keep me busy, give some structure to what my daily routine, then you may be able to take money from other retirement sources, meaning non-retirement accounts, and keep your Affordable Care Act premiums very low. So medical insurance has a big impact on what somebody could or should do when it comes to a phased retirement. If you're in a position where you're actually going into a phased retirement after age 65, one sense that takes one of the big question marks off the table. You could go right into Medicare. You don't need to worry about whether you can retain health coverage through your employer or going to the Affordable Care Act. Now, though, that begins to impact your Social Security. Should you go ahead and start Social Security early? Do you wait till full retirement, which for many people is age 67? So if you go ahead and start it early, now you're subject to income limitations as well. Those income limitations are based on your earned income, i.e. your part-time or your contract work. You don't have to worry about rental income, distributions from retirement accounts, pension, etc. But that threshold is pretty low, meaning in today's environment, if you were to earn more than about $25,000, they actually start taking some of your Social Security back. So depending on how much income your phased retirement may be bringing in, that may impact you to the point where you simply don't take Social Security, or you need to hold off because if you were to try to take it, you're going to lose most of it based on your income. One other impact we've seen of a phased retirement, and this may be more specific to your employer or certain companies, but if you're collecting a pension and you want to go back to work for that same employer, we've seen some cases where there's a clause in that pension that if you're back to work at the same employer earning above a certain amount, they actually pause your pension. That becomes another big consideration because what's the point of continuing to work if you're going to lose the pension that you were getting anyway? So when we look at this idea of a phased retirement, first as being, is it really voluntary of your choosing? There's still some big decisions that come into it on how you address the Social Security, how you address the medical side, and then also making sure that from a tax point of view, if you are trying to do things such as Roth conversions or moving money around for tax purposes, does that extra income from that phased retirement offset or upset the other strategies you had in place? So when we talk about this idea of phased retirement, it's generally a financial plus in both cases, but there's definitely differences between people who would go into it voluntarily because they think they're in pretty great shape for retirement versus those who are forced into it by their employer or change of health or some other circumstance. So I hope today's video has been helpful. In the next video, we're going to touch on a different scenario where somebody is forced into that early retirement, but they're going back to work because they know they're not quite ready to fully retire or not quite financially where they want to be. If you have questions on your overall retirement planning, whether it be things on Social Security, Medicare, the Affordable Care Act, make sure you subscribe to the channel. If you do have particular questions about your individual case, feel free to reach out to us at info@outlookwealth.com. Thanks for joining us.